Fully inspired, fully engaged. You're tuning in to Reality with Vicki Gunvalson.
Chris, welcome to Reality with Vicki. My name is Vicki Gunvalson, and Chris, we haven't had an opportunity to meet face to face, but we do know a mutual friend, and Elisa had introduced us. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your business. I've had a chance to look at your website and do some research on you, but tell our listeners and followers what you do.
So I'm a divorce lawyer based in Los Angeles. I'm in cases throughout California and focusing on complex litigation. So these could be acrimonious divorces. And I have a specialty in premarital agreements, both in preparing those and in litigating them. And kind of fell into this line of work, never thought I would want to be a divorce lawyer. But it turns out to be an incredible area because I never get bored. And there's people in crisis that need help. And with a balanced, experienced lawyer's help, I can guide them out of that and help them start the next chapter of their life.
And give them some sense of hope, because I got to imagine so many women are going through this demise of marriage, and whether they're married or whether they're dating somebody, when a separation happens, it's devastating, and you've got to deal with the emotions of what everybody goes through, and we all want to get our money out of the marriage, and so you're there to help them realize what's really fair, I think, right? I've been divorced. It was through mediation. Just to give you a little background on myself, I went through mediation for about 4 years. I own an insurance and financial services business, and we were amicable up until about the 4th year. And I'm a numbers freak, so I did a balance sheet. You get the river house, I get the big house, you get this, I get that. And I balanced it out pretty close to the penny. And then somebody got in my husband's ear at the time and said, she's got a business and you're 10 years older, and why don't you go after future earnings? And I was shocked. And then we ended up having to get our legal teams and waste, a lot of money. Not that you're a waste, but it was, forensic accountants coming in my business, and, it was a lot on me. And I just kept thinking, okay, well, divorce isn't that important, then let's just get back together, because I was thinking that getting back together and solving our marriage is easier than dividing everything up. And I know a lot of people have gone through those emotions. So do you ever kind of lean on them and say, is there any room for reconciliation, or is it once they come to you, they're pretty much done, right?
Well, it depends. Many times it's too far gone, and we're just moving forward and trying to get out quickly, because a divorce case that goes on 4 years, and I'm sorry to hear that happened, because these cases do not get easier the longer they get. They don't age well. And so it needs to be handled quickly before people start talking or thinking about other things. And, and it's going to be messy, and it's not going to be fair, and it's not going to be easy. Being stuck in a situation like that for 4 years just makes it harder. Now, there's some couples that go through that whole process and they never fight, and they get along, and they're totally easy and compromise. And I ask them, like, why are you getting married? Like, like this is incredible that you can communicate and trust each other and make a deal.
Right.
But they do. And then there's others that are just going to fight viciously. Where the problem is that to make an agreement, we need trust, communication, and respect. And by definition, all three of those are gone in a breakup. So my role is to help restore the communication through legal counsel, help restore trust through disclosure of financial information, and then having respect by listening to each other. And so we need to rebuild some of that a little bit to get our deal. Other lawyers, they just put gas on the fire. And so we're not bringing value when we do that. And unfortunately, sometimes people pick a lawyer like that without knowing, and because they heard the cheerleader in that lawyer and thinking, oh, this person is going to fight for me. And then they realize that they're just hurting them.
When we get married, we are in a church and we're standing in front of God or whatever your beliefs are. And then you end up getting divorced and you're in the courtroom looking at this partner that you created a life with. And it's just so sad to me. And, you know, it makes me gun shy of ever getting married again or ever trusting again, because it does fear me. You know, people can change. People can
Well, they do, and they can grow apart. And I have seen through helping, I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and I've seen second marriages and people finding true love. And it's really different than what I expected before, because I always thought true love would be something you did when you were young. But I've seen these couples, you know, get married later in life and just be the perfect match for each other. And I think that the part of that is obviously learning about ourselves and being happy with ourselves, but also that you've seen how bad it can be and the investment that needs to be made in the relationship. And that's where we fall down a lot, because we spend a lot of time courting each other, and then once we're married, and then we move on to whatever other interest we have in our life.
I know. And I that's what happened with my husband and I. We were married 20 years, and I started building my business super successful and running all over the place, and we grew apart. And if I would know now what happened during that, I would have been able to stop it and fix it. But I allowed that ball to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the resentment to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it was over. And I think you're right, second or third marriages, if whatever they may be, as you get mature age, I'm 58, you know now what red flag to look for, you know now what not to do in a relationship to never have that happen. So I think that's post the divorce, but in the divorce, what is your average time from start to finish? Are you able to get people unraveled and on their own?
Well, I think if it's amicable and everything goes well, and there's some assets, you know, you house and other stuff, you're looking at least 6 months.
Right.
And that's if it goes well. If it doesn't go well and they're going to fight, it's probably 3 years. We've seen them last 10 years. On average, they're probably a 1 to 2 years, because some people will start off fighting, and then they'll learn that there is no justice.
Right.
That there's no judge with a magic wand that says you are the good person and the other one is the awful one. That never happens. And they'll learn eventually. They're just going to waste all their money and then make a deal.
Hard to make, you know, money's so hard to make, and it just, you know, to ruin enough thing over money and such, it's just so hard to make. This made me think of something. Can you tell us I know every state has different laws, but what is it, the rule of thumb for alimony, child support, or spousal support for how many years you're married?
Sure. So we have two basic systems in the United States. If you're on the West Coast, you're probably in a community property state, and which treats a marriage as a partnership. And so that whatever property is acquired during that marriage is community, meaning that it has to be divided 50-50. And then the property that's brought to the marriage is all separate. And so in a state like California, all that property that's acquired during marriage is going to be 50-50. Then we determine income, and child support is set on that income. It's an algebraic formula, but you might figure 8, 10, 12% gross income is going to be paid for child support. And then what's left over could be allocated for alimony, and that could be 25%, maybe even 40% of the income that's left over after paying child support. So in a longer marriage with a lot of property, the spouse is going to end up dividing everything 50-50. And then if one spouse is working and making a lot of money, they could be paying maybe 50% or 40% of their income on top of that, even though they just divided their stuff 50%. So not a bad place to be divorced in California. Other states do it equitably. And so what they do is, in dividing property, rather than just saying, hey, it was acquired during marriage, divide by 2, they look at a whole bunch of equitable factors. How long was the marriage? What is the income coming off of this property? All kinds of considerations, and they make an equitable division of property. And in those states, there isn't really any need for alimony, because they've already divided the property with alimony type factors in mind.
Okay. It's interesting. So every state is different. Those of you that are listening, obviously, if you're contemplating divorce, it's going to be bumpy. It's going to cost you some money, and if you can do it in sort of a agreement where you don't have to lawyer up both of you, you're going to have more money to live off of and things like that. So I've got some other questions I wanted to ask you. So you said that you kind of fell into family law. Are you married? What is your personal belief on marriage and divorce and things like that?
Sure. So I'm married. I started in criminal defense, and then I met this gentleman, Peter Walzer, who was running a small family law practice, and ended up joining up with him, become a divorce lawyer. And I was single at the time, and I figured, well, I am never getting married now. There's
Right.
no way.
So way too much, right? Right out of the gate.
And so I ended up meeting my wife, and
Was she one of your clients?
no,
Okay.
I wish she probably would have had some
Right.
money.
Right.
So I met this lady, Abby, and she's very sweet. And the thing I liked about her is that when I saw her in conflict with friends or family, she was never mean about it. She was always took the high road. So I figured she'd treat me the same way.
Amen.
Um,
The character.
and so that's and so I've been married now for 16 years, and I love her a lot, but she had some health problems. She had a stroke,
Oh,
and so that's been pretty rough for us to deal with. And so but we're together and we're happy, I hope, and trying to just move through that daily.
yeah, that's the richer or poorer, sickness and in health, right? That's when you take those vows. So that's tough stuff, and I'm sorry. My best to you for that. But it's we need lawyers. We need protection as either a woman or a man, whoever is listening to this podcast right now. We need to be smart about what we bring to the table. I believe when we get to that lawyer, okay, we agree to this. What is what we don't agree on? And that's where hopefully that a good lawyer like yourself will come in and say, okay, listen, we can fight on this for 2 years, but let's compromise. Let's meet you in the middle, and let's get this done so there's no more demise and heartache. So
Yeah, I mean, it's what I've seen is that you have these two spouses that aren't getting along, and then they each hire a lawyer, and so now we got 4 people involved in that need to work this problem out. Now the problem is that these divorce lawyers have their own set of issues, and they may not be very balanced themselves. They may feed on conflict. So if the spouse hires the wrong type of lawyer, we're never going to get this resolved. And that's the ones that just go on for years. They're acrimonious. And if sometimes a client wants that, they want revenge or something. They're just sick. But for normal people, the lawyers bring value by looking at an asset, deciding how to divide it efficiently, and looking what support should be, what other people have done on custody arrangements, and then knowing like, hey, I've seen people litigate over their little kids and now they're adults, and I know their kids as adults. I know that people survive this, even though in the moment it feels really bad. So we can guide people through, but we need to have that counselor role rather than just putting our warrior advocate hat on.
Right. And be compassionate. So prenups and postnups, this confuses me a little bit. So you had mentioned previously, if you go into a marriage with property, it is yours. So if I go into a marriage with Steve and I own property, it will never be his? Or do I have to do a prenup and a postnup?
So in California, for example, we have strong protections for premarital property. So if you're married and you owned a bunch of stuff from before marriage, that is your separate property. Or if you acquire it during marriage through an inheritance, it is your separate property. And what that means is it's not subject to division with the other party, as long as you keep it separate. Now, of course, if you spend it or mix it in with everything, then that's different. But if you keep it separate, it will be separate. There can be a little exceptions, like say, for example, you have this premarital business and you get married. Well, the moment you're married, that's still your separate property, premarital business. But now here you are working at that business during your marriage. And under this partnership model that we have in California, your time now belongs to your marital partnership. So if you're putting in time, the partnership has to be paid something for it. And so there would need to be some reasonable compensation.
That's what happened with me with my divorce. I started the business. I was in insurance prior to marrying Don, but then my business changed names and I started building it bigger. But because he never stepped foot into the company, it was acquired growth in that 20-year marriage, and that's how he got future earnings and such. And I had to do, a factor and pay him. Otherwise, he was going to stay in my business, which he never was. So that was important for me. And this could be not gender specific. When I said to the judge and said to my attorney, well, that's not right. He never worked in my business. And she said, well, listen, Vicki, this is not gender specific. You are the breadwinner. You were the one that was making the money. So therefore, you've got to pay. And I thought, okay, now I know what it's like for a lot of men out there that work. Their wife stays home. Not that they're not validated on working at home, but they were the breadwinner, and now they're going to have to pay to cover that family and cover that wife.
It's rough because when you build a business like you did, it's like another baby, it's another child, and you spent your life working on that, and then now you're having to pay somebody for it that they didn't do anything. They might have even frustrated or made it harder for you.
They were, because you were not home enough, and I'm like, well, I'm working, So, yeah, it was a big challenge with that. So, so basically, what you're saying is, you don't have to do a prenup if you're bringing in personal assets prior to the marriage, but anything that's acquired during the marriage obviously would be part of that marriage, right?
Yeah, so that's where the protection would come. So, ideally, like if you had a premarital agreement in that prior marriage, you could have excluded any growth in your business during marriage, or he could have waived any right to reimbursement or compensation for the time that you spent on the business, and that would have just been off limits. And so that would be held up in court. But getting a premarital agreement, that's not an easy conversation to have with a prospective spouse. I mean, it's.
Well, if they love you for who you are and they don't want your money, it should be very easy. You should know that right out of the gate. Now, what about a postnup? What does that do?
So a postmarital agreement, they're rare. So a postmarital agreement is one that's made after marriage for a couple that plans to stay together. So not a divorcing couple, one that plans to stay together, and they want to reorder their finances so that something that was community is now going to be made separate, or something that was separate will be made community. So we'll see couples sometimes doing that. And where it comes up is maybe they fought a lot about money, or maybe there was an affair and they don't trust each other anymore, but they're willing to give it another shot. And they don't want to go through a messy divorce. So they'll say, hey, we're going to work this out, but we're going to divide our stuff and into separate pots, and there won't be any communal property anymore. Or maybe somebody gets a big inheritance and they're working at the family business now, and they want to say, hey, this is all mine. It's not going to be yours. Let's confirm that in writing. So I've started a lot of postmarital agreements, meaning negotiate and drafting them, a lot more than been signed, because who's going to sign something like that?
Right. Well, I always said, I'm going to nup it to death. I'm going to nup. If I decide to get married again, I mean, I'm engaged, but if I decide that, yes, I'm doing this, nup. I'm going to do pre and post, and because I don't want anything ever to be taken away from me again as a business owner, and whether you're a male or female, it really doesn't matter. But I think that if you go into this knowing I love you and I want to be with you and I don't care about the money aspect of it, there should be no reason not to sign a pre or post.
Well, I'm going to challenge you on that. I think it depends on where you are in your life.
Right.
In your stage, I mean, you have that control and power and wisdom, and and that makes a lot of sense for you. But for somebody who's just starting out, So say somebody in their early 20s is marrying somebody who's extraordinarily wealthy, and they're going to have kids. And now they're going to have prenup that says she gets nothing.
I get it with the kids, but if you've got kids and you're coming in at a later age, why should I give anything away when if God forbid there was a divorce or a demise of the relationship? So I know if you're building a family together, I probably wouldn't say that. And also, if you've given up your life, your career for helping your spouse to build his career, I wouldn't agree with prenup or postnup. I'd say we build this together. I'm going to be part of it if it falls apart. So, there's so many emotions with all this, isn't there?
It's hard, and I think when I'm counseling clients, it's what do you want your marriage to look like?
Right. How do you want
I mean, you had I saw on one of your podcasts talking about the vision board, and I really like that because it's like you're gonna map out your marriage. What do you want that to look like? You want to say, hey, what mine is mine and yours is yours. What if we break up? Is that really the way we want that? And then to think how do those decisions impact the relationship and the power balance, the resentment that can develop. I mean, my thing, so when I counseling a client wants a prenup, I say, what's your goal? And they usually say, well, I want a strong protection against divorce. And I say, that's not your goal. That's a ridiculous goal. Your goal is to be married for life and be happy.
Right.
And they, oh yeah, well, of course that.
Right.
Well, okay. So if your number one goal is to be married for life and be happy and never be divorced, how is this document that we're creating serve that goal?
Right. I'm writing that down. What's your goal? Those of you that are listening, what's your goal in your relationship? And if you both are coming in with the same goal, that you will plow through the good and bad times and you'll never be divorced. I mean, that was my parents, and I'm sure your parents' generation. Very few of my friends' parents were ever divorced. And if they were kind of like looked frowned upon. Now it's becoming a 50%. What is the statistics nowadays? 70%?
It's, I mean, well, 100% for me, for what I'm seeing, but yeah, it's high and the stigma's gone. And I think that's a problem. And that when it's too easy to be divorced, I mean, of course, there's some couples that should be divorced and there's abuse and they should not be together. But absent that, people should be together. And if it's too easy, and we see this with rich people. They can be divorced. It's no problem. And so it's almost too easy. And so
many, sorry to interrupt. Why do you think there's so many celebrity divorces? Why do you think it's Hollywood? I mean, I see it with my show. Almost every single person on my show has been divorced. I think everybody. When you look at that and you look at the California, in Illinois, where I'm from, none of my friends are divorced. They plowed through the good and bad times, and they're not skipping through the tulips, but they're not miserable, and they're on the common ground that getting out is not an option. We have to figure this out together, and we're going to stay committed. But it seems California, and I'm sure you deal with a lot of celebrities, they just bail. I mean, it's like, okay, on to the next.
Yeah, I think that there's certainly pressures that are taking one or maybe both spouses away from the home for long periods of time to work on their career. There's a lot of temptation.
Yeah.
There is this more of a casual view towards marriage where it's kind of disposable. Like we say, there's no stigma attached anymore. And so it is very common among celebrities. But what's different about celebrity divorce is that we rarely see them fight. And so they've figured out a way to resolve their cases pretty quickly and quietly, whereas the rest of us non-celebrities are stuck going to court. And that's because they have a brand to protect.
Right. They just want to quietly get divorced. And like sometimes you see them on the news or something like so-and-so got divorced. Like, let's just say Brangelina, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. It was just like all of a sudden they were getting divorced. It was like nobody even knew that they had a separation or an issue, and they have all these kids. And that's a perfect example that we as the public don't really know what goes on behind their doors. So we talked about prenups. We talked about the impact of a divorce on a celebrity. It's not frowned upon anymore. It's kind of like, okay, you're getting married. See you in 5 years. I don't know if you follow Jim Edmonds and Megan, and they were so mismatched. And I said 5 years, and they were 5 years in one day. And you could tell when people are together, if they're jiving, if they're respectful of each other, if they love each other. And, it's sad I feel bad about pegging them as divorced. And he's, world famous baseball player. But, you look at the people that put their lives out there publicly. I'm one of them. And then they get divorced. And it's like, okay, well, she got divorced. And in Chicago, where I'm from, you don't get divorced. You plow through it. And fell out here in California, and it's the way of life, it seems like,
Yeah, and I think if somebody is mismatched that badly, that probably better is to end it early, because people don't change, and being stuck 20 years in a bad marriage is not a good
Right.
sentence to have. So, I think people should be getting counseling and working on that and understanding what they need to be fulfilled. And if they're not getting it, to definitely demand change or get out of the relationship. So I'm not although I like people staying together, I'm not an advocate for misery.
Yeah. We got one, I always say, this is not a dress rehearsal, right? If you're miserable and your partner doesn't want to do anything to, like you say, I always say, fill up my love tank. If you ever watch my show, I say it like, when my love tank's empty, I can't do anything. I'm paralyzed. I don't think correctly. When I don't feel loved, I just feel, insecure and all those other things. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. It's
Well, I
tough.
love that concept. And what I've been thinking about it is that, we also have to think about our partner's tank too. And that's the problem, is a lot of us thinking about, what do I need to be fulfilled? And now I'm resentful at you because you haven't fulfilled me. But then, well, what am I doing to fill your tank?
Right. I'm writing all these things down because I'm learning. What do I need to fill your tank? I remember Steve said to me one day, I don't have a tank. I said, yes, you do. Everybody has, whether it's affirmations, whether it's physical touch, all those 5 love languages, which I love about. Everybody's got something that they need, 1 or 2 or 3 items. And when you start feeling they're not there, that's when you look for an affair, or you look for it someplace else. And, I've really affair-proofed my relationship, because I had an affair, and I had an affair happen on me. And, my husband was unfaithful. And so that just changes everything. You become completely numb to, can I trust anybody? And so when you said, trust and respect and all of that, it's so important. And in divorce lawyers, once we get to you, we just want you to handhold us and help us through it. So those of you that are listening, Chris, why don't you tell our listeners and viewers how they can reach out to you? You're not a counselor, you're a divorce attorney, right?
Well, it's an attorney and counselor at law is how we've been viewed. And so if you Google me, Christopher Melcher, you'll come up with, my contact information, or go to my website, Walzer Melcher. And I do encourage people to talk to a divorce lawyer. If you're considering, you're unhappy in the marriage, is reach out and say, what does this really look like? Because the idea of pulling the trigger and getting divorced sounds right maybe to some people, but then if they hear, like, what is this going to cost me? I'm going to have to start over again. How much support am I going to be paying? I'm going to have to bargain to see my own children. Knowing the reality of that decision is going to help maybe say, hey, maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe if I invested more in this relationship, I could find a way to be happy or make my partner happy. So or go down to the divorce court. That's even free. Go watch a session. You'll run away. You won't want to be part of that.
Yeah.
But find out, because it's not something to play with.
Yeah, our heartstrings are very precious, right? So when you get hurt and you go down that road. So, Chris, I want to thank you. I just hope that the listeners have gotten some good information, whether it's about a prenup or just knowing what the rules are in California and other states about a divorce. I think it's important. So lastly, this pandemic, are you seeing a rise in divorces?
Well, that was the that was a theory, is that everyone's going to lose their mind because they can't be together and divorce. So we're all busy. So all my colleagues were as busy as we ever were. And so I think that this is a challenge to the relationship. We're all under a lot of stress. And I've been trying to remember that in my life and how I treat people, because we're on edge. And so we need to give each other some love and attention and some room to make errors. And if your relationship is weak and you're stuck in that situation and the lockdowns, it's not going to survive. But we can also be stronger together and pull it together by working and leaning on each other. So I think there's some good stuff that comes out of bad times. And so hopefully people have learned from that. I know I'm home a lot more. I started cooking again. I started being with my son more. So, good
Not all
stuff.
bad. Yeah, it's not all bad. It's not all bad. Well, blessings to you and your wife and your family. And I just want to say thank you for your time. Time is so valuable. And I think if we can help some people listening, then we're doing our job as leaders and, people of profession. So hopefully I'll never have to call you. But so anyways, my very best to you. And thanks for coming on the podcast. Okay.
Thanks, Vicki.
Okay. Take care. Okay, bye.
Now, glutathione is a big word, but it's the body's own master antioxidant. So it's a scavenger for free radicals, for bacteria, and what's relevant now, viruses. This is new to the marketplace. There's no other product on the market that has the ingredient NACET.
And basically NACET increases the production of that glutathione that is in our body already to strengthen and enhance our immune system and keep it strong. Elevated sense of well-being. Supports muscle strength and endurance. Cognitive function. Powerful liver support. Energy. Helps blood sugar regulation. Superior bioavailability of key ingredients.
One of your best defenses against COVID is a strong immune system. Taking GSH Plus as a daily supplement does all that. And now we have the product out on the marketplace.